It's my honor today to present Todd Ryle and Ian Morrow from the Australian Institute of Sports, who are going to talk about their innovation journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. So I'm Todd. This is Ian. We're super excited to be here. We're probably more excited even just to be out of Australia at the moment. It's an absolute heat box at the moment. So this cool weather is awesome. We love it. The colder, the better. Let it snow. So look, before we start, a quick thank you to Fusion Sport for giving us the opportunity to present today. Now they've structured these 2 days really good. They've got a bunch of clients. You'll see the logos down the bottom there. And they're actually delivering like real case stories like we're doing today. So look it up. It's in room 206 in the data viz room, just up the hall. Definitely worth your time to go have a look. All right, we're going to start with a quick video. This will give you a little bit of background on the Australian Institute of Sport, and it will also give you a little bit of insight into our project. So our project is called the AMS, which stands for Athlete Management System, and it's built using the SmarterBase product. So we'll start with the vid. Hope you enjoy it.
Over the last 5 years, our data environment has changed.
Listen to that crowd. You can see the Australian bench. They are hungry.
And so have our athletes. The AIS is responsible for leading the delivery of Australia's international sporting success. An efficient data management system means good communication, so support staff can access and profile an athlete's status. SmarterBase provides us with the whole picture, so we know what changes to implement and when. 38 sports, 17,000 users, 45 organisations globally, and 1 athlete management system. Welcome to the AIS, powered by SmarterBase.
Okay, so prior to 5 years ago at the AIS, we never had a central athlete repository of data. We had a lot of data, heaps of it. We had like 30 years, in fact. But what it resembled was something a little bit like this. So this is a smashed meat pie, and us Australians, we love meat pies. They're a little bit different to the American variety. But what we found is that in terms of if you think of the filling there, the ingredients, the data, if that's the data, it was actually really good. You know, the pies were tasting good. The problem was we just had no organisation and we had no structure around the pie. So we found, there'd be other amazing projects which would be rolling out, but we'd end up with more smash meat pies. So what we were actually aiming for was something a bit more like this, okay? Looks good, doesn't it? All that data in a nice round pastry filling. What we actually ended up with, though, after 5 years of rolling out the system, was something more like this. So we're talking about trays and trays of pies, a lot of data. So where we are today, we have an athlete management system used by 45 high-performance organisations around the country. We monitor a lot of squads and teams. We're talking like over 2,500 squads, which equates to around 12,000 athletes being monitored in the system. A really high staff base, so we're talking about in excess of 5,000 staff and coaches using the system. Hundreds of security roles to govern all the access. We're collecting data from over 1,000 forms coming in, and we've just got a crazy amount of alerts each day which fire out to coaches. So look, in terms of the overall system, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of medical treatments over the 5 years, millions of training logs from athletes, and even last year we actually just tipped over the 3 billion records in it. So this is the journey that we actually want to share with everyone today.
Okay, so we've got heaps of big numbers, but obviously we didn't do this overnight. AMS has been 5 years in the making. Being an athlete management system, what better way than using Cara here, one of our rowers, to tell our journey. So Cara started rowing in 2013 at the same time we were building our AMS. Just 1 year later, Cara is already our under-21 national champion. So she's training hard, she's fit, she's strong, Another year later, she breaks down. So she has multiple rib stress fractures, and now she's off water. She's missed our under-23 national team. And if you talk to Cara at this point in time, all she knows about load management or injury monitoring just comes from training or chatting to the athletes around her. So if we fast forward to today, we've got our athletes. They have so much more access to their data, along with their support team. But it's been a journey. We've had to learn a lot from our data to get it to this stage. We've actually had to change a lot of cultures within our sporting environment around the way people use and view their data, and actually just get it embedded within our sports to begin with. So if we go, Todd's got the clicker, not a good idea. This is an example of Cara's data now in AMS. So the important thing here is that the athletes have access to their own data, and our coaches and support staff also have. So this is the journey we're going to go through, and we'll start with how it's all set up.
All right, so we're going to explain the building of this system, because we're not actually just talking about a sport, we're not just talking about one club, we're talking about rolling out an athlete system all over the country. So we're going to get a little bit Google Maps on everyone here. I've got an image of Australia, and here's an overlay of the United States. Apologies to Alaska and Hawaii, I couldn't fit you in on this one. But you can see we're talking about something which is roughly the same sort of size. Now the AIS is based in Canberra, which makes our US equivalent around Georgia there, and this is where we first implemented the AMS. What we did then, we linked one of our sports. So one of our sports being Netball Australia, we linked them onto the same system. Following netball, over the 5 years, we've then rolled out another 37 sports. Now within Australia, we actually have quite a thorough state sporting network also. So think of this as where a lot of the athletes will use as their home base to train. So an example being in Sydney, there is the New South Wales Institute of Sport. So they were also implemented and linked to the main primary system. Following New South Wales Institute of Sport, we then linked up every other state in Australia to the one system. So this all looks pretty easy for these logos all over the country, but I can assure you that these states in particular, they compete really fiercely against each other. They're vying for national spots. So it's similar to maybe like Georgia and Alabama agree to use the same athlete system. International-wise, we have the European Training Centre, an AIS base in Italy. This is where a lot of the athletes, if they're overseas, will go and train there. So that's been rolled and connected to the main system. And then look, worldwide, daily we're talking about countless camps and countless competitions who are also using the same system. So what we want to do now, we actually want to drill into one sport, just to give you a little bit of a feel for the complexity that's involved in doing one sport. Okay, so Netball Australia. Netball is one of our big sports in Australia. If you're not familiar with it at all, it's kind of like basketball. There's still hoops at either end, but no slam dunks. So this is our grouping structure in AMS for netball. So it actually covers 700 athletes across 120 groups. And the important thing for netball here is that they can now monitor, track and administer all their athletes right from our high performance Australian squads through the Centre of Excellence we have, the National League, all the way down to the state level, right down to under 17s. So in the highlighted column there, just to point out as well, this is actually our professional league in Australia. So the Suncorp Super Netball League is just like your NBA or ice hockey league, but we actually host it just as a subgroup within this grouping structure. Security obviously becomes very important at this stage, and Smarterbase will let us control this down to the individual level. So this is now the breadth of information that we're capturing in our management system. So the way we've set this up, we have a lot of common forms. So we only have one illness form, one injury form, one nutrition consult in AMS, and then the system allows us the flexibility that the sports can then control their own monitoring, their own scholarships, their own testing data.
So the benefit of having all of this on one system is that if basketball want to build a form, they're monitoring lower leg load or something, and netball want to use the same form, we can simply link it out to them. So all of a sudden, we're sharing our resources, we're avoiding a lot of duplication, just to help us achieve our common goals.
But what's the point? So what's the point of having all this data, or in this case, all these pies, if you can't eat them? Like, we didn't just want to bake things, we actually wanted to get maximum benefit out of all this data that we were collecting. So we've learnt at the AIS that in order to get maximum benefit, there was one really key thing that we needed to do, and we need to do it really well. And that is just have really good people around the data. Strange thing probably to say at a sports analytics data conference, but data doesn't replace good people. And this is all that unseen work that happens behind. It's all the workshops, it's all the phone calls, it's all the emails. It's often the most challenging part, but it's also the most rewarding part if you get it right. So this was an image that I took on my phone last year. This is 4 years into our rollout. And this was just one of our workshops we had, and there's two key things in here that I want to point out from this picture. One is user-based maturity. So we found really early that if we don't have an educated user base with good data maturity who understand, or even a shared understanding across a lot of our topics, then we were just diluting a lot of our data for analysis, for reporting, anything that was coming out of it. The second part here is Fusion Sport involvement. When you're rolling out a national system and you've got a hell of a lot of people and you're also overlapping new technology on top of them, you need a seriously good vendor who can keep up with you. So at the AIS, we were super aggressive over 5 years rolling this out, and it was critical for us that Fusion Sport would understand, one, our challenges, and we had lots of them, and secondly, they just needed to understand the direction, the pathway where we wanted to take the system. So you can see from this photo, this is 4 years in, Fusion Sport, they're based, up the front, to the left and to the right. Don't come for day one, don't install for 6 months and take off. We actually need our vendor there for the whole process. So what happens when you actually get really good people and good data, you can actually get some amazing projects out of the system. So Ian and I, we've picked out 3 examples that we're going to run through now.
Okay, so our 3 projects, they're kind of all about athlete availability. So if we can have our athletes on the field training, competing, it's a good thing. Training load. Training load is one of our major objectives of AMS to begin with. So it's been going since day one, and we continue today. We have over 1 million training sessions recorded in AMS, which has led us to years and years of research. So along with the research that we've published, we also have rolled out a lot of education and presentations to athletes and staff around this topic. It all comes back to the question of, should I train today? But we don't want to just help our athletes understand whether they should train today. If you have a competition in 6 weeks, how do you get there safely? Making sure that they're not going to spike when they have to play 8 games across 3 days. That's a big increase in training load. So we have visuals like this for our staff and athletes. So we have our training load. This is internal load. Can you go back, Todd? You've ruined my slide again.
Can't go back.
Oh, damn it. So we want to make sure that our coaches have the planning tools. So we allow them to predict into the future so they can see those things. For our athletes, this is the type of visuals they now have access to on their devices every day. So they have their training load, 1 week, 4 week, 16-week views that they can simply toggle between. At the AIS, we also host the NBA Global Academy, and this is an example that a coach would see as they log into the system. So we really want them monitoring their loads and also having being able to track that availability across their squad. These guys have missed 1 training session out of 280 odd. So our coaches can keep that in mind.
Second example, so this is the Stay Healthy project, and this is a great example when you get really good data and you get really good people coming together. So this was a project led by Mick Drew at the AIS, and in a nutshell, it was all about just keeping athletes healthy, so they could train and compete leading into the last Rio Olympics. It's now turned into an ongoing project, but the whole idea of it was, with all our illness data captured across all our sports nationally, you can see in this graph here, we could actually track the exact times and the exact illnesses of when they were spiking. So in this example here, we can see that we really needed to take that peak off that mountain there. Otherwise, with all that illness, we had so much interrupted training leading into Rio. So with this project, 317 Olympians were screened in phases, and the results which we found for it in terms of preventative follow-up were just amazing. So a couple of examples here, we found 1 in 2 female athletes with low energy availability, and that has a really high association to illness. And even this one's quite high, with 37% of all athletes having immune functions. Also another really high risk one for illness. Here's an example of a screen that we'll see in the AMS. So this is an overview of one athlete who's completed the Stay Healthy project. And you can see it's a whole range of streams. We're talking about a lot of blood testing, saliva, body composition, there's DEXA, it's travel, it's training, it's sleep. It's all those streams put into one against each of those athletes. The big point here is that without the AMS, or Smarterbase, embedded nationally in our system, there was just no way that we could facilitate the collection or the analysis of all this data.
Okay, so the third example is just machine learning or predictive analytics. So I'm not going to go into this too much because there's a lot of machine learning topics here today. So having our data aligned in AMS, as I said, we have one injury record, one illness record. It's all in one spot to begin with. So that's really helped us to partner with leading experts in this space. What we do know is that simple clinical tests won't provide the full picture for us to be able to predict injuries. And we do know that increasing the volume of our sources will help us to improve detection. So we think we have actually a pretty good model for injury prediction for the next 3 days at the moment. But what we need to do is make this accessible to our non-data scientists. And this is where we come back to Coach Speak. So again, at a data analytics conference, but don't be nerdy. This is what our biggest task is making the complex simple. I can't go to Todd as a coach and go, you have a 77% true positive likelihood of being injured today. Just look blankly at you. This is just an example, this screenshot of the complex made simple around the AIS, posted up on our pool deck.
Right, open philosophy. So with our rollout, we had this view at the AIS that we wanted an open philosophy with data. We knew that we had to connect the system to multiple internal and external sources, so lots of third-party vendors. So we've got this amazing changing landscape in sport, and it's crazy and it's dynamic. So we just need to be really flexible to make sure we could jump on board with our sporting demands as they came in. So here's a quick snapshot of probably about half the products that we integrate with using the AMS at the moment. One point I wanted to make here is that it's not all sensors and it's not all training systems that we're integrating with. We actually connect with a lot of real business applications. So one example being Remisol. So this is our blood analysis system at the AIS that we also connect with and the data comes through. We also connect with Nucleus. This is our clinical appointments and booking system that we pull through. On more of a discipline level, we knew in Australia that with our strength and conditioning that there was another 3 main products that they wanted to connect to. So that was Team Builder, Gym Aware and Elite Form. So once again, all connected to the main one hub. But what I'm going to drill into a little bit more here is the Health Kit integration project. So this was an amazing project. It's gone for 2 years now. It was a joint project between the AIS, Fusion Sport and Tantisia. And look, the whole idea of this integration piece was about athlete engagement. That was the pure focus. How do we get athletes completely addicted to their data? Okay, we wanted them to have ownership for all their training monitoring, all their wellness monitoring that they were putting into the system, and we wanted it to become as sticky as possible. So what we did, we designed an Apple AMS application on the watch. We also designed an iPhone companion app that goes with it. So where we're at today, we're at version 58. We've had over 200 athlete engagement sessions on feedback to come back, knowing what they liked and what they didn't like, and then putting that back into the product. But it originally started with a pilot group. So we had 80 athletes across 12 sports. We put a watch on their wrist and they wore it for 3 months. So the whole idea for this group, we had really good athletes who were engaged and used to put a lot of training entries in. And then we had this whole other bucket where we knew they were infrequent users. So we really wanted to test their scales. What we found at the end of the 3 months was pretty mind-blowing. So we had some athletes who would put in 2 to 3 training entries per week. After using the watch for 3 months, they didn't miss one single entry. So we're talking about an increase of around 80% in the data collection for those infrequent users. Here's a few snapshots from the iPhone companion app. So the one on the left with the status and the big rings. This actually links really well to what Ian was talking about before with the training load. So where we've got athletes at the moment, you can see, it's probably too small, but there's a little 280 value that's put up there. So athletes can now see how much training units they've got remaining for the week before we go into what we call an overreaching or an injury risk zone. The one on the right, this is, we've integrated with one of the world's best sleep monitoring apps. So now athletes can get, once again, more engagement in their sleep data if they're using it for that. So example here, those bottom rings there, athletes can now check what their average heart rate was for the night, also their deep sleep, and then the inner rings, they can actually compare it to the last 7 days. In terms of training, so we've got athletes now getting instant feedback on their stats. So this one you can see, you know, there's the heart rate, they're seeing their splits, they're seeing their pace. We've taken it even a step further. So this one in the middle, this is a customisation with Swimming Australia. So the swimmers will finish their set and they've got instant access to their strokes, how many strokes per lap, their pace, their velocity, their distance, all that coming through. The last one I've got here, this is an insights view. So one of the things we found from athletes is that rather than just report on the now, they really wanted an easy way to see their trends over 3 months. So what they can do now, they can actually start to easily look and see, is my soreness impacting my training, or is my stress impacting my sleep? So once again, it's those sort of visuals that we've put on the iPhone companion app purely for athlete engagement.
Okay, so this is great. We have the athletes all addicted to their data. So it's on their device, it goes straight to HealthKit. And this is where Fusion Sport helped us out to develop the Smart Health Sync app, which then just, the athletes log into it once, sits in the background on their phone and just passes the data into AMS. So this is just an example of a dashboard then that we have in AMS from this data now from HealthKit. And all of a sudden, we all talk about training load, and now we've got life load. So we've got everything that they're doing outside of training as well. We've got access to their heart rate throughout the whole day. We've got access to distances and everything that they do outside of structured training. What we're pointing out here with this orange box on the top there, that's their internal load that we've been talking about. So it's over the Christmas period. So they've actually gone out of their daily training environment. They're gone away back to their family and they've cut off a lot of their training workouts. But you'll see from the bottom one, they've actually increased distance. So that's distance on the bottom. Who knows what they've been doing? They've been out in the paddock chasing kangaroos. I don't know, that was the best Australian one I could come up with. So all of a sudden, we have a lot more life load. This is where we're going to continue our journey now. And so this is what you'll see into the future.
All right, so to wrap this up, it's the data culture, not just at the AIS, but nationally across Australia has changed. It was probably most evident recently there was a volleyball biomechanics jumping and landing study. It was actually approved and funded, but it got cancelled because there was a lack of injuries. And anyone who knows volleyballs and leg injuries knows that this is pretty ridiculous. So across the board, we're looking at 30 to 40% down in injury reduction. We've even had some squads as high as 90% annually down in injuries. The big sort of take-home message from Ian and I is that it's not actually, for the AIS, it's not actually just about the training load, and it hasn't just been about a screening, and it hasn't just been about research streams, and it hasn't just been about predictive analytics. It's actually been working with our teams to enable them through a whole range of shared and connected modules, that's brought the result. So look, it's a long way from Australia to Boston. We want to share as many stories while we're here. We're here for a couple of days. We also want to listen and learn. We've got so many challenges ahead of us. We love to collaborate. So look, Ian and I have actually agreed that anyone who comes and says g'day over the next 2 days, we will, personally, from Australia, post you a meat pie, okay? Australia Post is not renowned for being too reliable. So
meat pie may vary.
But that's the deal on the table.
Okay, so thank you all for your time today. Just a reminder again, so Todd and I back up at 3 p.m. in the data visualization room. And then there's also really good workshops on some of the JavaScript dashboards coming up. We're back up again tomorrow, so come say good day to us up in that data visualization room. Thank you again.
Thank you.